All right, let's get started. I'm gonna give a message to my Korean subscribers. 우리 한국인 구독자들한테 말씀 하나 전달할게요. 오늘 방송은 다 영어로 할게요. 그 전 라이브 방송에 다른 솔라나 VC들 분석했었을 때처럼 이제 솔라나 위 사람들이 다 영어 하니까, 그리고 중요한 솔라나 중에 중요한 사람들이 다 영어 하니까 오늘 방송 영어로 할게요. 만약에 해석 필요하면 댓글 남겨주면 제가 한국말로 해석해 줄게요. So gonna do the broadcast in English just like I did my previous broadcast in English when I looked at these Solana VCs. Everyone again in Solana, who all the higher ups, they all speak English. All the VCs, all the people, those guys, they all speak English. So I'm gonna be doing this broadcast in English today. Hello to Spartan Group. I have no idea again if anyone at Spartan even listens to this shit, but I will be talking about Spartan and their involvement in Solana, one of the more well-known Solana VCs. So people who are curious about what Spartan does in Solana, and if they don't know anything about the people at Spartan and things like that, I didn't really look too much into them before this broadcast, but I did do a little research on their team and some of the people who are involved over there. So I will be talking about all of those things during this broadcast. So if you're new to Solana, you don't know much about Solana, you don't know what kinds of VCs invest in Solana projects, those are the kinds of people who will be tuning in, obviously. And I the research process wasn't too bad. I looked at their portfolio and some of the things that they invested in, pretty interesting stuff. So I want to get started with the role of Spartan and what these guys do, right, in crypto. So they're VC. I've kind of known them for a while. They've been on my radar. I haven't paid too much attention to them because they haven't invested in too many Solana projects, but I have seen their name pop up from time to time. So they invest in different blockchains and different dApps in crypto, right, across multiple chains, right. They've invested in Polkadot, Cosmos, Ethereum, Solana, cross-chain apps, lots of different things, right? They also have advisory services, right? So they do fundraising, mergers and acquisitions, and all kinds of stuff, right? For these crypto startups, right? So everything that has to do with fintech, these guys are involved, right? So they've got a lot of people with a lot of experience in traditional finance, right? I looked at some of their team members, and I will be going over some of their team members, right? They come from the big banks, right? Goldman Sachs. I saw lots of big, investment banks and things like that. So I will be going over the team in a second, right? But just in case you didn't know exactly what these guys do, this is what Spartan does, right? Um, very typical VC, right? Very typical VC, run of the mill VC stuff, right? Um, Now, if you go to their team, I did quickly look over their team. They've got like actually a lot of people on their team. I didn't know most of the people. They have a lot of analysts and associates, and I mostly focused on the executive team because those are the guys at the top. So the executive team consists of basically five people: Melody, Kelvin, Lior, Casper, and Sean. Those are the guys who are at the top of the food chain there. Now, I did notice one name that was interesting. Anytime I look at these VCs, same thing with these Solana projects. When I look at these Solana projects and the dev teams, or I look at these Solana VCs, I always see who the people are. And I always check to see if there's Korean people on their teams, whether it's a VC or um, a protocol, right? And it turns out there is actually a Korean on um, at over there at Spartan, right? And her name is Chiwon Kang Jiwon. And I didn't really know about this person, but apparently her role there is head of investor relations. She's from Goldman Sachs. She's got a lot of experience, apparently, right? In investment banking, basically, right? And she's over there in Spartan, right? Spartan, I believe, is based in Hong Kong, right? They're based in Hong Kong, so they're a VC that's based in Hong Kong, right? But I think they have operations in multiple places. They do a lot of things in different countries, right? But there is a Korean there. I don't know how close she is to Solana. Right? I don't know if she has any relation to Solana. I don't think she's very close, but she's probably met with some of the teams in Solana, if I had to guess, right? Now let me go to the next slide here, right? What to what extent are they involved in Solana? They did invest in Solana. So if you're wondering, like, how close are they? They're pretty close. If they've invested in Solana, I consider them a pretty close VC, right? Not as close as like Alameda. If you had to compare like Alameda or Solar Eco Fund or those other VCs, definitely not as involved as those guys, but they are definitely, I consider Spartan a Solana VC, right? Because they've been involved with Solana for a while and they've invested in Solana. So I consider them Solana VC through and through, 100%. Now, while I was looking through their client list, I did notice some overlap with another big Solana VC. 직원이 300명 채울 벤처 이름. 직원들이 그렇게 많아요? Do they have? I don't know if they have that many employees. I just looked at their page here, right? 페이지는 여기 봤는데 여기가 뭐 직원인 것 같은데요. 뭐 다른 분 있으면 뭐 뭐 일반 사무직 뭐 그런 사람들도 있을 수도 있죠. 근데 제가 알고 있는 건 여기 이 사람들이 이제 직원이에요. So as far as I know, these are the guys on over at Spartan, right? But anyways, 스파르탄 영어 300. Ah, the movie 300. Yeah, yeah. 맞아. Yeah. That the same Sparta in 300. Yeah. The ancient city state of Sparta. But so I did notice some similarities between some of Spartan's port codes. Of course, they invested in Solana. Jump also invested in Solana. Spartan also invested in Bybit, which is an exchange, right? The interesting thing with Bybit, the overlap here with Jump in Bybit. Bybit is an exchange that is promoted by a lot of YouTubers, and that's very interesting. Now, Bybit is known for a lot of degen shit. They do a lot of weird degen shit, like they try to push the leverage trading and shit like that through their influencers on YouTube and stuff. So if you look on YouTube, a lot of them are sponsored by Bybit. They promote their Bybit referral links, or they'll say like you can get $500 worth of Bitcoin if you register through Bybit or some bullshit like that, right? So um definitely there is some overlap with some of our bigger Solana VCs, right? So guys like Jump are much closer to Solana in comparison to Spartan, right? If you're wondering, like, how are all of these Solanas, right? How do they compare in terms of their involvement in Solana, right? Jump was much more involved in Solana, right? Spartan not as involved, but there are some connections when you look at some of Spartan's clients in depth, right? So I went through all their clients and saw what are the relationships, right, between their clients and Solana, and to get a better idea of how close they are, right? So if you start with Blockfolio eventually was basically bought out by FTX, and FTX bought them out, right? So Blockfolio is a mobile app, right? To for retail to manage their crypto assets, and FTX basically bought them out. Everyone knows FTX and the Solana connection, very closely related, right? Entities, right? Next up is Deribit. Deribit is also kind of close to Solana because a lot of our dApps are partnered with Deribit, right? Zeta, for example, those guys, right? So because Deribit is an options exchange, a lot of our dApps are partnered with them, right? So if a lot of our DeFi protocols do have a connection to Deribit, right? So there's a lot of overlap there, right? Stacks, now they're Bitcoin DeFi. They're basically a competitor to us, but some of the VCs behind Stacks, a lot of people already know. Arca Capital, A41, those guys are behind Stacks, but they also invest in Solana. And Spartan also invests in Stacks, right? Now, I'm going to talk about this, how Stacks is interesting because a lot of the Korean VCs that invested in Stacks, they are heavily invested in Solana, right? So there's a kind of a conflict of interest that Spartan has been able to avoid for the most part, and I'm going to be giving some specific projects, right, that point this out, right? But there is a connection again through Stacks and Solana because of the financial interests that are behind Stacks that are also behind a lot of the Solana projects, right? Like I just mentioned, right? And then the final connection here is with BitDAO. Now, BitDAO is a DAO. It's kind of like a fund, an accelerator that sponsors projects, DeFi projects. And one of the things that BitDAO has invested in, if you look at BitDAO's portfolio, BitDAO has invested in FTX. So a lot of the clients are overlapping in terms of the interests behind these guys, right? Blockfolio, Deribit Stacks, BitDAO, right? These guys, there's definitely some connections here to Solana through these clients, right? In addition to Spartan having invested in Solana itself. If you didn't know this stuff, right? If you already know this stuff, you know, good for you, right? This is for the people who haven't really looked too deep into Spartan and how connected they are, right? It's always something that I've been kind of curious about, but I didn't really look too deeply into until, today, right? What kinds of projects in Solana has Spartan Group invested in, right? These are the Solana portcos that Spartan Group has invested in. Oxygen, Bonfida, Maple Finance, Soulstarter, Coin98, Solve Protocol, Burn Finance. Now, I wouldn't really consider Maple and Coin98 Solana projects per se. I will be looking at each of their investments in Solana one at a time, right? But I don't consider Maple Finance and Coin98 Solana projects per se because Maple Finance started on Ethereum. So they're a DeFi lending protocol. I've already covered them on a previous broadcast. They started in Ethereum and they recently came over to Solana, right? So I'm gonna basically pass over these guys, and I'm gonna pass over Coin98 because they've basically they're a wallet, but they've integrated with a lot of different chains, right? Binance, Smart Chain, and things like that. So I'm gonna be focusing primarily on Oxygen, Bonfida, Soulstarter, Solve, and Burp Finance, because these are the projects that Spartan has invested in, right? So if you look at Oxygen, I've covered Oxygen, right, on a lot of previous broadcasts. Did not do very well. This is well known as being one of the worst projects in Solana. Just a completely failed project, right? Turned out to be vaporware. There were a lot of VCs that were involved with this, but this turned out to be primarily a problem with the team and the developers on Oxygen, right? I don't think the VCs did their due diligence. The VCs had no idea what they were doing when they invested in Oxygen. They leveraged the names of these big banks, Barclays and things like that, right? So they had the banks and they used the names to promote this ship project. There was no due diligence done on the team, and this ended up being vaporware, right? But Spartan did invest in Oxygen. So this investment did not turn out very well for Spartan, but it didn't turn out well for any of the VCs involved with Oxygen, actually. So, not a very good track record, right? Starting out with Oxygen, right? Bonfida. Now, Bonfida is very interesting. On a previous broadcast, I did cover Bonfida. I think it was around this time when it was around at $2, and I commented to my subscribers who told me, or I told my subscribers, hey, at least it's above the IEO price. So I thought they would rebound from this. I thought they could hold on to, whatever little momentum they had during this time when I was looking at Bonfida. I looked at Bonfida when I was looking at the other Solana VCs, in ROK Capital, A41, Defiance, and Sino. When I was looking at those VCs, I did look at Bonfida because some of those VCs contributed to Bonfida. It was during this broadcast here. I did look at Bonfida. Apparently, this was in January-ish, right? So this was around, I guess, around here when I was doing the broadcast around here, right? But since then, they are now below the IEO price. The IEO price here was $1.20 something. They're currently at 45 cents. And one of my subscribers did tell me, I remember one of my subscribers told me the VC unlocks are coming up. So there's a good chance this thing's going to flop. I guess after 6 months, that subscriber was telling the truth because that sell pressure kicked in and Bonfida is now at 45 cents. It's at 45 cents, right? So peak was $13. This thing pumped to $13 and it's literally at 45 cents right now, right? So if you invested in Bonfida, you did not make that much money in my opinion because if you got in late or if you got in during the wrong time and you try to catch this falling knife, you got screwed, right? So the only people who benefited from Bonfida were the people who got in early, right? And then they dumped this thing down to zero apparently, right? So very similar to Oxygen, Bonfida not doing very well, right? Their token is not doing well at all, right? So if you invested in Bonfida, I mean, you are not doing well, right? So Bonfida, if you don't know what Bonfida does, they're involved with naming. So they have a Solana naming service, just like ENS. They have a DEX and they have some trading bots and things like that. So that's what Bonfida is. Oxygen, Bonfida did not turn out very good for Spartan, right? Let's go to the next project, Soul Starter. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Soul Starter is one of the confirmed scam shit projects in Solana. Austin tweeted this all the way back in January. Zach was pointing out Soul Starter from a very long time ago. Everyone knows Zach. Here's what Austin said. To be fair, Soul Starter is a giant scam that anyone with credibility in the Solana ecosystem has publicly discredited. Anything they touch is held to a similar standard and is not an accurate representation of the ecosystem as a whole. So the literal previous head of marketing at Solana, Austin Verts, is calling out for the record SoulStarter and telling people that it's a literal scam shit project. Just like Zach was pointing out from last year. Zach was pointing this shit out last year. I remember Zach was pointing this out last year. Austin acknowledged this. I have been saying this for a while, and I pointed out how Arca Capital invested in SoulStarter. They put their names behind SoulStarter, right? Now, there are a lot of Solana VCs involved with SoulStarter. Very surprisingly, Spartan Group was involved with SoulStarter. I'm gonna assume, right? Everyone knows that this is a scam shit project, right? I'm gonna assume that a lot of these failed investments, right? Oxygen, Bonfida, SoulStarter from last year, these turned out to be terrible investments for Spartan. I think this is part of the reason why Spartan has shied away from investing in our ecosystem, right? Definitely, if I had to guess, right, Spartan probably was very turned off by the low quality, right, of these projects and the people involved, and that's why they haven't really invested in a lot of our projects, right? There's other reasons that I will be discussing, right, in the conclusions page, in the next page, but SoulStarter was probably a big contributor to this. Again, this was one of the worst investments in Solana, period, right? These guys are just mocked, right, by everyone. Everyone knows these guys are a scam ship project, right? Neko who's involved, right? He's not a very good person, right? Now let me go to the next two projects, right? There's two other projects that Spartan has invested in Solana. The next one is Solve Protocol. Now they're a Web3 protocol. They're involved with NFT bonds. So I did follow them recently, and I looked at what they do. All-in-one financial instrument trading. So they're making it possible for people to trade NFTs, kind of like an NFT marketplace, I guess. And Soul vouchers are financial NFTs that lock up digital assets. So you can trade them, you can fractionalize them, right? You can, I guess they're fractionalized, so you can trade fractions of them, right? There's also a marketplace for these vouchers, right? So you can lend. There's NFT lending and derivatives as well, right? So they're doing some things with NFTs and financializing NFTs, right? Just to give you a very rough summary, right? So you can see Spartan here, right? Um, this is kind of interesting. Spartan has some connection to Hashed here, right? Obviously, and CMS. Spartan, CMS, Hashed, right? These guys are all kind of tied to Solana in one way or another, right? Same thing with DeFi Alliance, GBV, Genesis Block Ventures, right? Crypto, I've seen these guys on a lot of things, right? So there's a lot of overlap with these VCs. They tend to invest in similar projects in Solana, right? So this NFT protocol on Solana, Spartan Group was involved with this, right? Me personally, not really interested in these kinds of protocols, but that's where this is one of the investments from Spartan Group, right? Now, the last Solana project that I want to go over, Burnt Finance, right? So this is an NFT auctions and launchpad protocol, and um, this is one of the more well-known NFT projects in Solana because of the VC backing. They've received a lot of VC backing, right? Multicoin is behind him. Alameda, Animoca, Defiance is behind it. You got a lot of these big VCs that are involved with Burnt Finance. Now, here's something that I think even Spartan is not aware of when it comes to Burnt Finance. So Jason, if you're out there, hopefully you watch this later. I think you'll find this very interesting. I'm fairly certain that what I'm about to show you, you probably don't know this. I'm pretty sure your old coworkers at Spartan, they don't know this either, if I had to guess. So I will be showing you something very interesting, specifically related to Burnt Finance, right? And while I'm speaking to Jason here, if Jason, again, if you if you did not catch my previous broadcast, I did have a special message for you, Jason, right? So I recommend you watch this old broadcast a couple days ago, and you guys were mentioned by Andrew from Block and Alien, right? About how Beta was being dumped by Defiance, and I was shitting on Defiance for dumping, right? And you guys were bag holding after Defiance dumped on you guys, right? So again, I've seen some of your port codes. Defiance is in some of your port codes, right? I don't know why you're defending them. They're probably one of the worst Solana VCs of all time. I've called them out so many times. So my advice to you, Jason, is stop defending your shitty ass VC buddies. There's a lot of shitty ones in Solana, and Defiance is one of them, right? So if you ever get this message, I hope you watch this video, Jason. I know you're not at Spartan anymore, but you might find what I'm about to tell you kind of interesting, right? So let me go back to the thing with Burnt Finance. So here's the thing that a lot of people don't know about Burnt Finance. I did just tell you that there is a heavy VC, backing behind Burnt Finance. Now, a long time ago, this tweet came out from Demon Collector about Burnt Finance, and let me tell you what happened with these guys. I'm like 99% sure those people over at Spartan and Jason, they don't know what happened, right? It is time for another FUD thread from yours truly about Burnt Finance and how they stole tools from Skeleton Crew, probably lied to a bunch of high-level VCs like Alameda and Animoca about their launchpad. So basically, what they did to summarize, I'm gonna go over the tweet, but I'm gonna give you the summarized version. There was another team that was working on some NFT tooling, and they stole the code from that, and they presented it as their own, and they basically convinced the VCs to back them rather than the team that originally put out that code, and that was very fucked up. It was very unscrupulous. But let me tell you about the details. I think the people over at Spartan are going to enjoy this. Let's start with the latest. Burn Finance was caught using Treat Toolbox in Miami at Solana conference without ever mentioning that Skeleton Crew actually built the tools. So again, there was some kind of tooling, right? NFT tooling that a different team in Solana made, and Burn Finance passed it off as their own. This tool is open source, but using it and showing it off as your own is slimy to say the least. When I saw this, I was very disappointed in Burnt Finance because I know Burnt Banksy is behind Burnt Finance, and he is one of the primary draws to Burnt Finance. But the way the Burnt Finance team conducted themselves was very dishonest. It was very low integrity, very dishonest, very unscrupulous. I did not like this at all. This was the first mentioned by the Skeleton Crew team itself. What did they use the OS tools for? A launch pad, of course. One of the most profitable ways to get quick profits out of people. Somehow they failed to mention that their code is their code. Anyone in their right mind would have apologized or at least acknowledged their mistake and move on. Not Burnt Finance, I guess. They chose a hill to die on, and it was the wrong one. Taking OS free tools and use it for profit and being smug about it without ever mentioning the creators, right? So this is one of the tweets that he's referring to, right? So Burn Finance came out with this tweet and they said, "We made it work and for free," passing it off as their own code, right? So what did Skeleton Crew do when they found out about this? They took the diplomatic route and DM'd Burnt Finance directly. Of course, the slimy dudes failed to respond or address them. What can you expect from shady dudes? They just ignore them. So the Skeleton Crew, they didn't go public with this, right? They took the diplomatic route. You got to respect them for not calling out Burnt, and they tried to resolve this, in a respectful way, and they got ignored by Burnt, right? Again, very low integrity, right, on the part of Burnt and the whole team over there, right? Why does this matter? Because it shows the rich dudes don't care about the small teams that have roots directly in the Solana ecosystem in their community. They just want to make money and profits above anything else. Skeleton Crew has a small NFT collection as funding. Burnt Finance has 8 million raised from a bunch of VCs with deep pockets. They've raised money from a few months back from, again, Alameda, right? Animoca. Spartan was involved. It's obvious a small team can't fight them directly on this, right? Okay, Demon Collector, you talk a lot of shit. Where's the proof? Glad you asked. This is what they've showed to Miami, and it looks identical to the Treat Toolbox tools. We would also verify the code, but of course, Burnt Finance doesn't release open source code. This is something that is a very big point of contention in the Solana community right now. Armani and all of those other guys, right? Armani behind Anchor, right? And a lot of the people at Solana are criticized, right? I think Armani himself has criticized a lot of these teams for not opening their code. A lot of these projects in Solana are closed source. Now, the Treat Toolbox guys cannot verify the code, all of it, I guess, right? But from what they have seen, it is basically identical to, right, what Treat Toolbox made, right? So the Burnt Finance code, right, is basically they just copied it, right? You can tell just going through the UI, right? So this is a big problem in Solana. I think a lot of the smaller teams in Solana, they are aware of this. They get basically shouted down by drowned out by um, the bigger teams that have more money, and they can't compete with those guys, and it's kind of unfair for the smaller teams, right? In Solana, and I kind of feel for those guys, right? Let me go to the next tweet here. Want more proof that Burnt Finance never gave Treat Toolbox any credit? Just read any of the following shill journalism pieces about their launchpad. So apparently they had people. Obviously, the VCs want this pushed, so they have their media connections and they put out these articles to generate hype VC backed projects. That's how it works with these VC backed projects, right? Nothing here is mentioning Skeleton Crew. There's no credit given to them in these articles, and I feel very bad for these guys, Skeleton Crew, right? They just basically got trampled on. No credits given to them. Burnt Finance takes all the credit. They get all the VC backing. It's really fucked up, right? Also, Project Serum. Have the guys over at Burnt Finance mentioned that their launchpad that you use is not their own code and that they use the Treat Toolbox code. So Demon Collector and Treat Toolbox called out Serum. Serum was called out by these guys. Now, here's the interesting thing. Serum did not acknowledge this. Serum did not acknowledge this. Now, here's the really interesting thing with Serum. Serum recently had Serum is basically the same guys behind Pith, right? Jump is behind Serum and Pith, right? Pith recently had a Discord town hall meeting with Burnt Finance, and I actually listened in on their I don't know if it was a Twitter space or if it was their Discord thing, but they recently Serum or a Pith partnered with Burn Finance to produce an NFT, right? As to commemorate their partnership with Burn Finance. And I listened to it and I was wondering how many people in this town hall even know that Burn Finance did some sketchy ass shit, right? These guys are some sketchy ass mofos. How many people listening to this even know this happened? I would have guessed none of these people knew this, right? Because this was this was brushed under the rug. Very few people even know that they did this, right? But I know about this stuff and I remember because I've been investing in Solana for a long time, right? So I remember these kinds of things, right? Um, they Burnt Finance blocked Demon Collector, right? Obviously, people don't like to be criticized on Twitter, and they got Demon got blocked by Burnt Finance, right? But I'm putting this out there because this is very important stuff, right? Because I look at these developers, I look at these founders, and I judge them by how honest they are, right? I look at their actions and I see how honest they are. It's something that I tell my subscribers all the time. When I endorse projects in Solana, I have to see these things and I have to know that you can trust these kinds of people, right? Who you're putting your money into, right? If you fuck up like this and you make a mistake like this, there's no way in hell I'm going to endorse these guys, obviously, right? I was kind of disappointed that Pith knew about this shit. 100% the Pith team knew about this, right? There's no such thing as they can't claim ignorance here, right? Because these guys called out Serum for this, and Serum, there's a lot. All the Serum people know the Pith people, right? There's a lot of overlap there, right? So Pith, there's no way they could have claimed ignorance about this. They knew this 100%. They still chose to partner with Burnt. Obviously, the VCs are behind Burnt, so they're all buddy buddy with each other. They're all close to each other, right? So they're going to support each other, right? And it's very disappointing, right, to see this kind of stuff, and there's very little knowledge of this kind of stuff and how these people behave, right? It's dishonest. It's unfair to our developers, right? Especially our smaller teams that don't get the VC funding. I mean, it's not. I mean, they were completely just ignored, and these guys they didn't even get credit for it, right? I think if they just had even given them acknowledgement that those guys over at Skeleton Crew came out with this really cool code and we used it, right? And the least that Burnt Finance could have done is acknowledged, right, the contribution of Skeleton Crew, but they chose to brush it on the under the rug, and then they blocked people who called them out for their dishonest bullshit. I don't like to see that stuff happening in Solana, right? It's very disappointing to me. So I don't know how close Spartan pays attention to these developers and these teams in Solana and what happens in Solana. I really don't know how much they pay attention, right? So I don't know what their um their quality control team is like. I don't know how much due diligence they do in Solana. I think they do very little of it, because if they had invested in projects like Oxygen that failed miserably, right? And Soul Starter, which was a literal shit scam project, that those two projects alone do not reflect upon Spartan Group very well, in my opinion. And then they still chose to get involved with Burnt. And that was a little disappointing to me when I saw this, right? And I realized that Spartan got involved with Burnt, right? So, based on these portcos and the performance of the portcos and the behaviors of these teams that they've invested in, right? I'm just at overall, when I look at them, I'm disappointed, right? I am disappointed in Spartan, right? They have not made very good, you know, investments in Solana. I question their decision making, right? There's so many good teams in Solana that they could have gotten involved in, but they did not. These are the people that they chose to get involved in, right? In Solana. And it's a little disappointing, right? Overall, when you consider all of these portcos and you look at them as a whole, financially, right? Just finance wise, these weren't very successful projects. They were not good investments from a financial perspective. Spartan probably made out with good money, right? They probably dumped, right, towards towards these peaks, right, when these projects were immediately post IEO or after they've pumped, right? They probably made out, right? So they probably made money, but most of retail did not make money, right? If they invested in these projects. So, what kinds of conclusions can I draw, right? Um, like I said, definitely, if you look at Spartan's investments as a whole, non Solana, they mostly invested in Ethereum DeFi projects, things like the Graph, MakerDAO, Paraswap, Synthetics, Persistence, and other projects on other chains, um, Polkadot projects, Cosmos projects, and things like that, right? So, part of the reason, because of their investments in competing projects on other chains, I think that's part of the reason why they haven't really invested in a lot of Solana DeFi projects. The other thing is, um, their Solana projects that they've invested in so far, they haven't been very successful, right? I just told you how Oxygen would turned out to be vaporware, right? Their founders were very unreliable. The projects that they invested in, they had very bad tokenomics, right? The tokenomics of Oxygen were really bad. They had other bad VCs, right, in their cap tables, guys like Defiance and things like that. So, they've haven't invested in a lot of Solana projects, right? So that's it's a little disappointing, because I looked through the different projects that Spartan invested in. They've invested in a lot of projects. I mean, they have a lot of projects that they've invested in, like, over the years, just a ton of them, just lots of random stuff. I was curious. I did look into some of them, right? They've invested in a lot of different things, right? They're involved with DAOs, DeFi, Web3, lots of different things, right? Um, but in terms of their investments in Solana, not very successful. Not very successful. I cannot say that they've invested wisely in Solana, right? And it's a little disappointing, because Spartan, they kind of have a reputation as being one of the better VCs, one of the more trustworthy VCs, but their performance, right, of their portco is not very good, right? Not very good. right? So if I had to guess, Spartan will probably not invest in many Solana DeFi protocols because of their bad experiences with Oxygen and Bonfida and Soul Starter and things like that, right? I don't think they're going to be involved in um, many Solana projects, right? And of course, like I just said, most of their DeFi port codes are on Ethereum and other chains. So there would be a lot of conflict of interest if Spartan suddenly started investing in Solana DeFi projects. Right? They've invested in lending and dexes and dex aggregators in Ethereum. So if they ever got into Solana DeFi, there would be a blatant conflict of interest, right? So I think because of these reasons, they're not going to really invest in those kinds of protocols. I think they'll be focusing on other sectors, right? Gaming, metaverse, Web3, shit like that. I saw that they had a fund, and this was kind of interesting. They recently got a partner, right? We Mix invested in their $400 million gaming metaverse fund, right? So that was very interesting, or 200 million. So Spartan started this fund, right? This $200 million fund, right? And WeMix was one of the VCs, the Korean VCs that contributed, partnered with Spartan, right, and contributed to this fund, right? And WeMix is very interesting because recently on my channel, I've been discussing these Korean VCs. I've talked about WeMix on previous broadcasts, right? When I looked at all of these Solana VCs, WeMix was not something, it was not a VC, a Korean VC that was very heavily involved with Solana. But WeMix is slowly getting more and more involved in Solana, either indirectly or directly. Because if they're investing together with Spartan, right, and Spartan is going to be investing in these Solana projects, right, be it Web 3.0 metaverse or NFTs or whatever, right? WeMix's ties are going to be, they're going to become closer, right? Their ties to Solana are going to be closer when they make these kinds of joint investments, right? So, um, what I think that Solana is going to try to do, Solana is going to try to get some of this funding that these VCs are uh, looking to invest in, right? So Solana, they're trying to get some funding in Web 3.0 and metaverse and gaming and shit like that, right? So Solana is definitely trying to get some of this action here, right? Because they know that big money is going into this sector. Um, and WeMix again, they are one of the big kind of gaming Web 3.0 metaverse, that type of fund and company here in Korea. They're involved with a lot of that stuff there, right? So Rods and Tolly, they're here in Seoul right now. I can guarantee, it's almost a guaranteed, right? I can almost guarantee that they will be meeting with the We Made and We Mix guys, right? I'm also fairly sure Amy already met with the We Made We Mix guys 100%. They've met with those guys or they will meet with those guys, right? So Raj and Toli, 100%, they want to get some of that funding for sure, 100%, right? So they'll probably be selling, right, Solana, right, as the only, right, scalable L1, right, things like that. I'm sure they have their pitches, right? So I don't know exactly what's going to happen, right, in the future with Spartan and Solana. I don't know how much deeper they're going to get with Solana, but it's going to be interesting to see, right, how much funding Spartan provides for these Solana projects, right? And as a retail investor, I'm just a normal retail investor. My subscribers are all normal retail investors. Um, I think a lot of people are going to be tracking where Spartan chooses to invest in and then trying to get into those projects if I had to guess, right? Because this big money is coming into gaming and metaverse and Web 3.0 and all that type of shit, right? So if you want to look for investment opportunities, maybe seeing what Spartan invests in, right, in Solana, right? Maybe Solve. I don't know, right? I don't. Me personally, I'm not interested, so I probably personally won't be investing in these kinds of projects. But I'm sure a lot of my subscribers are curious and interested in this kind of stuff, so they'll probably be researching these Solana projects and investing in them because Spartan and some other guys are going to be investing in them. So if that's something that interests you, maybe you should pay attention to Spartan and any future involvement in Solana, right? But I'm sure 100% that Solana is going to try to get some of that funding, right? And try to find some, grow their own metaverse and gaming uh, on Solana, right? Now, I don't know. Um, and, when I look at these VCs, these guys, a lot of people put their faith into these VCs, right? Because the analysts and the partners at these VCs, right, they come from these big banks like Goldman Sachs. But in reality, and this is the very sobering reality of investing in crypto. Doesn't matter if you fucking come from Goldman Sachs and all these big investment banks. These guys, no matter how smart they are, they fucked up when they invested in Solana. They ended up investing in shitty ass Solana projects. They invested in fucking SoulStarter, which was a scam shit project. And these guys are coming from Goldman Sachs and shit, right? So, if my subscribers, this is something very important that I want to teach my subscribers. You can beat these VCs, right? These VCs are not any smarter than you or me. They really aren't. Doesn't matter if they have 15 years of investing experience and all this other bullshit or what other MBAs or pedigrees that they have, right? This applies to a lot of these VCs, right? All of these VCs, right? There were a lot of VCs that invested in SoulStart and that was not a very good decision, right? A lot of VCs invested in this, right? So it's important that although these VCs they're throwing money to projects, right, left and right, they don't care, right? They can make money because they get in right during private rounds, right, and they still get their multiples. The only thing that retail can do is be very critical when they see these projects that these VCs invest in and try to be a little bit more careful with how they invest in these VCs. And it's very important that my subscribers learn that, right? You can't just blindly trust these VCs. That line of thinking has fucked up so many retail investors last year and this year as well, right? We all know what happened with Luna. The people were blindly following Jump and all these other VCs, Hashed, right? Those guys, and we all saw what happened with Luna, right? It all came down to people who were very overly trusting, and they were very gullible, and they trusted these guys because they had these kinds of pedigrees and they had these names or reputations, and they fucking lost everything because they trusted these VCs. That's why I'm very critical about these VCs, right? They're not smarter than anyone else. They really are not smarter than anyone else, right? But if you're new to investing in crypto and you don't know anything about these VCs, right? Me personally, I didn't really know much about these VCs. I didn't really pay too much attention to them when I started investing in Solana, right? Um, I didn't really care about the financial interest behind most of these projects because I basically just looked at the projects on their own merits and I evaluated these projects by myself. I didn't really consider the VC backing to be a significant factor, right, in the one project that I formally endorsed on this channel. I've only endorsed one project in Solana Soulrise, and I looked at the project right on its own merits. That's the only reason why I endorsed it. I didn't care about the names that were behind it, right? That was a very small factor, right, in that endorsement, right? So all of these dudes, right, Hashed and We Made, We Mix, Samsung Next, whatever the hell these guys do, they are not infallible. They make mistakes. They're not smarter than you and me. They make lots of bad decisions. The track record shows it. So, it's up to you guys, my subscribers, to learn from their mistakes. You have to learn and you have to be a little bit more critical when you're investing if you want to succeed, right, in crypto. That's my advice, right? That's my final piece of advice, right, for you guys who are listening to this today, right? So hopefully you learned something interesting about Spartan. I definitely did while I was researching this, right? Especially when I was researching their port codes, right? They have very big interests in DeFi. They like to invest in a lot of DeFi stuff, but I think they're moving on from that. Like I said, they're going to be looking into gaming and metaverse and other Web 3.0 shit as well, right? So I understand that this is where a lot of the people in Solana are looking at and focusing on, right? For future investments. Of course, I will be covering some of this stuff on my channel as well, but me personally, I'm not really interested in most of this shit. I think it's going to be very easy to evaluate these metaverse and game investments because anyone can do it. It doesn't take fucking 14 years of experience at Ziff Capital Management and Deutsche Bank and fucking Goldman Sachs to evaluate these metaverse projects, right? Anyone can do it. All you have to do is test this stuff out and see if it's fun and see if you like it, right? So retail does have an edge here, right? Because they don't really have to take the advice of these VCs. They can evaluate these projects just like I evaluate these projects, right? On my channel for my subscribers, right? Anyone can do it. It's not complicated. You just have to spend a little bit of time, right, researching your shit, right? So I hope that my subscribers learn something valuable. I hope the Spartan Group, especially, they learn something valuable, right? I hope Spartan becomes one of the better Solana VCs. There's a really big vacuum in Solana VCs. The reputation of our VCs are basically like they're just their reputations are shit right now. So I hope that Spartan, they you know take the lead here and they try to invest in actual, investment worthy projects so that retail can trust them. And if they see Spartan, right, behind something, they can trust the project, right? They can trust them and invest in them with confidence. But again, right, burnt finance, not a very good decision, poor decision making, in my opinion, right, based on the thing that I just revealed and reminded you guys about. So I don't know what Spartan Group's going to do in the future, but I don't know exactly what their involvement in Solana is going to be in the future. But hopefully they take my advice too. Hopefully they learn something as well, just like my subscribers did today. All right. All right. There's one other thing that I want to cover, which is very, very interesting tweet that I saw from Reflection Digital. 이제 한국말로 같이 라이브 번역할게요. 라이브 해석해 줄게요. 왜냐면 제가 하고 싶은 내용 다 이제 끝났으니까 같이 볼게요. 아 이 되게 좋은 그 트윗 하나 봤는데 요즘에 Solana TPS가 너무 느려서 so everyone knows Solana has been dealing with this TPS bullshit for a while now. It's very interesting and informative article came out that summarizes the situation and what Solana's possible solutions are. 이 되게 좋은 이 요약 하나 나왔는데 이 Solana TPS 문제 되게 잘 여기 그 요약하고 되게 쉽게 이해할 수 있기 위해 이거 다 여기 내용이 나와요. 그래서 이거 추천합니다. 이거 한번 쫙 읽어보고 이 TPS 문제가 그 원인이랑 뭐 자세한 내용 근데 너무 뭐 전문적으로 이거 설명 안 하니까 되게 쉽게 이해할 수 있어요. So it's not super or uber technical. Anyone can understand this. So I definitely recommend looking this over, and this will give you a pretty good idea of what's going on with the TPS stuff and some of the solutions that Solana has proposed. 이제 Solana가 어떤 어떻게 이거 고칠 건지 그런 거 이제 그런 것도 다 이제 내용이 나오니까 한번 읽어보세요 이거. It's very useful article. I really like the summary, so I did follow these guys. 이, 이 요약 되게 좋아서 얘네들 follow 했어요. So I did follow these guys. Very very good summary, right? So you should probably follow these guys as well. 이 사람도 follow 하세요. 만약에 이런 거 관심 있으면. Okay. So that is it for the content that I wanted to push out. 제가 이제 하고 싶은 말 다 했어요. I'll be hanging out here for a little bit while longer, and then we will wrap things up. I'll take a look at some news and see if there's any news, and then we'll wrap it up. 솔라나 소식 조금 보고 아마 45분까지 그때쯤 끝날게요. Maybe we'll go to 45 and then we'll wrap it up. 그때 끝날게요. If you have questions about Solana stuff, 뭐 Solana 질문 같은 거 있으면 물어봐도 돼요. If you want to ask me any Solana stuff, I will check it out, and then we'll wrap it up. This tweet is hilarious. Crypto VC, Web3 deserves better critics. 이제 Web3가 비판한 사람들 더 필요해. 더 좋은 비판하는 사람들 필요해. VC during bull market 이제 강세 때는 bullies and intimidates reasonable critics into science. 이제 강세 때는 강세 때는 이제 비판하는 사람들 그냥 무시하고 그냥 못 듣는 척하면서 이제 약세는 VC들이 "Why are you all only coming out of the woodwork during a downturn?" 이제 왜 하락세만 뭐 비판을 하냐고. "Feedback is a gift. Long-term thinkers in crypto embrace." 이제 feedback이 선물이라고. 이제 아 장기로 이제 생각하는 투자자들은 되게 좋아한다고 이런 비판을. It's very true. This is 완전 맞는 말이에요. I mean, this is something that's very near to my own personal philosophy of investing in crypto. 이제 저희 개인 철학도 이 투자 철학도 저랑 되게 비슷해요. I've been very critical of the things in Solana that I've seen as I've invested in Solana. 이제 Solana에 투자하면서 제가 싫어하는 것도 되게 많아요. 그래서 물론 저희 같은 경우는 이제 완전 옛날부터 비판 많이 했었어요. My subscribers know I've been criticizing a lot of the bullshit. You guys know this. It's old news. I say it all the time, right? But it's good to see people who are, saying things like this. 이제 저랑 비슷하게 생각하는 사람들이 이제 비슷한 말 이제 하니까 너무 좋아요, right? Glad people are saying this kind of stuff, right? All right, I don't see any big news. 뭐 큰 소식 같은 거 없으니까. Yeah, I mean, it's Friday night. I don't want to keep you guys waiting. 불금이니까 너무 늦게까지 방송 안 하고. Um, I'll let you guys enjoy your evening. There's no questions. 뭐 질문 같은 거 없으니까 다 좋은 불금 보내세요. Enjoy your Friday nights. I'll catch you guys on the next broadcast. Let's make it 님 오늘 나와서 너무 감사해요. Thank you. Let's make it 님 for coming out. I'm very happy that you came out and you took your time out on this Friday evening to listen to all this. Thank you so much. I will see you guys on the next one. 다음에 봬요. Good evening, everyone. 좋은 밤.